Hi everybody, it's Luminosy. Welcome to my channel. In this video I will explain you how to create luminosity masks in Photoshop. The video will be very easy to follow, and I also created for you a Photoshop action which you can download just by clicking on the link below the video. And the only thing I ask you is please don't forget to hit the like button and to subscribe to my channel. Thanks. So let's jump into the tutorial. Enjoy! So let's jump into Photoshop. I choose this particular image which I took in May 2014 because it can help me to show you how to create and how to use luminosity masks, thanks to this very good separation between the sky, which is the lightest part of the image, and the foreground, which contains the darkest part of the image. And this separation will help us to better understand how luminosity masks works. So, first of all, what are luminosity masks? Luminosity masks are very sophisticated selections which allow us to select and separate all the tonal values in the photograph. And that's really awesome because once we select a specific tonal value, we are able to create some adjustment layers which targets that particular tonal value of the image. And this way we can do to the photograph we are developing some targeted adjustments to the specific tonal value we want to modify and we want to work with. And thanks to the luminosity masks, which are attached to the adjustments and which are self-federate, the changes that we will do to the photograph will be pretty smooth, pretty good, and above all, pretty natural. Now let's create finally the first group of luminosity masks, which are the Lights Luminosity Masks. In order to do that, we need to go to the Channel tab, and the first thing to do is to select the RGB channel. To do that, just hit Ctrl and click. If you are using a Mac instead, you have to use Command and click on the RGB channel. So once you click on the channel, you see that the marching hands appear. That means that the selection is active. Now we should save this selection with this button, and once we save that, we can see the first light luminosity mask. Let's rename that in Lights 1. Now to better show you this mask we have created, I hide the marching hands with the keyboard combination of Ctrl H or Command H on Mac. So in this way the marching hands disappear, but the selection is still active, because if you see the histogram, it hasn't changed at all. So how this mask works: all that is white is 100% selected. All that is gray, it's partially selected. That means the lightest gray are more selected and the darkest gray are less selected. And all that is black is not selected at all. So, as I told you at the beginning of this tutorial, the luminosity masks are very sophisticated selections, and for this reason we have all this gradation of tones in our mask, and this differentiates them from the classical selections, which are made up just of white and black. Now let's see a practical example on how this selection can be used in order to do some adjustments to the image we are working on. So with the selection still active, if we go to the Layers tab, we can create an adjustment layer with this button, and I choose a Curves adjustment layer for this example. And this way we create a new adjustment layer with the first luminosity mask attached to that. If you want to reveal the luminosity mask attached to the curve adjustment, you need to press Alt and click on the mask. And to hide that, press Alt and click again. Now if I modify this curve with the first luminosity mask on that, just by creating a point in the middle of this curve in order to bring up or down the overall exposure of this image, just by dragging it up or down to make the image brighter or darker. So as you can see, the image changes. It becomes brighter or darker. But the tones affected by the adjustments are the tones which are present in the luminosity mask. And the tones which are more affected by this luminosity mask are the ones that in the mask are completely white, and the tones less affected are the tones which in the mask are closer to the black color. So as you can see, when I modify this curve, the most affected part are the brightest part of this image, and the less affected part are the darkest. The same thing is when I bring down the exposure. As you can see, the darks in this image remains pretty much the same. Instead, all the sky and the water becomes darker, as well as the St. Peter Basilica, because it's partially selected by the mask, because it's gray in the mask. I want just to show you the same adjustment but with a simple layer mask created with the laser tool of Photoshop. So I create a pretty simple selection of the sky with this tool. And when I go to save this selection in the channels, I have a pretty rough selection of the sky because I really spent 10 seconds to create this one. But I want to show you that this selection is just white or black. There are not some grays in the mask, and above all, the mask is pretty sharp. It's not self-feathered. Now let's do the same adjustment of before, but with this mask attached to that, just to compare and see the differences between the two kind of masks. So in order to do that, I duplicate this curve layer, and then I delete the mask, the first light luminosity mask attached to that. Right click on the mask, then delete layer mask. Then I load this rough selection I created with the laser tool with Ctrl or Command and click. And then with this button, I attach to the curves adjustment layer this new mask. So as you can see, we have the layer mask attached to that. And with the same curve, the adjustment is not natural at all, because it's targeting just this portion of the sky. It's not self-feathered, and above all, it's pretty strong because it's a mask made up just of white and black. And remember, all that is white in the mask is 100% selected and affected by the adjustment layer. All that is black is not affected at all. And as you can see here, this portion of the sky, which is white on the mask, becomes darker, and the rest of the image is untouched at all. So these are the difference between the two kind of masks. And as you can see, this second adjustment has no transitions between the white and the blacks in the mask. And for this reason, you see this sharp edge between the part which is selected and the part which is not selected by the mask. So this is really the main difference between the two masks. And of course, this second kind of masks is not created considering the light in the scene, but it's created just with a tool, and it's a selection based on our taste. Hoping that the differences between the two kind of masks are clear to you, now I can continue in creating the next luminosity masks of the lights. And I start with this Lights 1 channel that we created at the beginning of the tutorial. And in order to create the second light luminosity mask, the first thing to do is select that again, always with the same key combination of Ctrl or Command click if you are using Mac. And the marching hands appear. That means that the selection is now active. Now we need to intersect this selection with the Lights 1 channel, and in order to do that, we press Ctrl, Shift, Alt and click, or Command, Shift, Alt and click if you're using Mac. And as you can see, the marching hands change. That's because we created a more restricted luminosity mask. Now we can save that with this button. And we can change its name in Lights 2. I keep creating more specific luminosity masks for the light, and with this selection still active, I press again Ctrl, Shift, Alt and click. The marching hands this time disappear, but the selection is still active. I save that again. And as you can see, this white luminosity mask is even more restricted compared to the Lights 2, because it targets just those stripes which are bright in the sky, and practically it excludes all the other parts of the image. If I create an even more restricted mask for the lights for this particular image, I will end up with a more restricted mask which will be made up of black, because we've reached the limit of the lights for this particular image. I show you. We get this warning message, we hit OK, and we save the next luminosity mask for the lights. We call this Lights 4. And as you can see, it's almost completely black. It just targets this really small portion of the sky. Maybe this will be a useful mask for do some specific dodging and barding to those small stripes of the sky. I finished the explanation on how to use and how to create the light luminosity masks just with a last example, always with a curve adjustment, to show you how those even more specific masks for the lights affect the image. So I choose the Lights 3 channel. I hit Ctrl click or Command click on the channel. The selection is now active. Then I go to the Layer tab and I create a curves adjustment. Now, if I modify the midpoint of this curve in order to bring up or down the overall exposure of the image, this time the mask is really restricted just to the brightest part of the sky. As you can see, the sky becomes brighter and the rest of the image is not affected at all by the curves adjustment. So for this reason, I told you that the next Lights Luminosity Masks are more restricted because they target really the brightest part of the image. We can also bring down the exposure of those parts. But as you can see, the adjustments affects only the parts that in the layer mask are white. Anyway, the adjustment is so smooth and self-feathered, so you can push this curve to the limit and you always end up with a result which is amazing, because there is not a sharp edge between the white and the black, but there are some grays, and those grays create a really smooth transition between the tones of our adjustment, and the result is just magnificent because it's so natural. I conclude here the first part of this tutorial on how to create the luminosity masks, and in the next one I will show you how to create as well all the darks and the midtones luminosity masks, giving you some practical examples on how they works and how they affect the overall image. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope to see you the next time. Cheers!